Hi, I'm back. I'm Greg Farrar. This is my COVID-19 trend analysis live stream. I do it about every day. Again, today I have opted for the private room in this community rather than the pretty one. So I guess logistics over aesthetics. So all the junk behind me, just try to ignore it. It's only the graphs that matter anyway. I will be covering the countries of the world, the states of the United States, and the counties of California in that order in 3 different sections in this COVID-19 trend live cast. So, diving right in, we see the total cases by country. The United States is always in the lead in terms of total cases. Hopefully always will be. It would be a remarkable thing for any of these countries to, or a new one, to take off to such a degree that they pass the United States in total cases at this point. Don't think it's going to happen, but it could. More interesting is the daily cases. Something worth noting, though not worth getting worried about yet, is the United States had an exceptionally high number of cases reported. These are confirmed cases in the most recent day. Twice as much as yesterday, well above its trend line. One data point does not a trend make, so that may just be the random fluctuations of the sort we saw here and here, but even more extreme. It could also be somehow the result of testing finally catching up and just finding more people who are confirming more people that we always kind of knew had the disease. The United States continues to be by far in the world the biggest contributor of new cases as well. If we look per million, though, adjusting for the size of countries, the United States is not the biggest contributor. That continues to be Ireland, though you can see Ireland is starting to flatten out, so that's nice. It was going up in a straight line as recently as yesterday, but it's had a few good days. Let's take a quick look at Ireland. It doesn't have a lot of cases overall, so it's pretty far down our top 25 list, but it's had a few good days again, and it's starting to show a real sense that it's flattening out. Belgium, obviously, more than flattened out at this point, headed downward even, having reached its peak. Spain, as we knew, had reached its peak and is now headed downward. For some reason, there's a day missing of data for Spain. All the other countries have that day. I don't think we've seen that before, so it'll probably clear up tomorrow. The United States, also flattening out, but here in 4th place per capita. And the United Kingdom also flattening out. There are really there's no bad news in the countries here. Well, maybe Pakistan, we'll see that in a minute. These are just in the top 25. But if we look at all the other ones a little further down, we do see things like Russia and Saudi Arabia that are still rising in new cases, but they're typically not accelerating in their rise of new cases. But there are some, Brazil as well, still rising. And then we see things like Switzerland, which has really clearly gotten over this thing and is headed into a much better place. Austria, Europe in general, and Iran also heading in a downward trajectory according to their reported numbers. Saudi Arabia and Russia we already saw, still headed upwards, but in total new cases. But the rope chart gives us a better sense, I'm going to zoom out of this, of where things are headed. So in total new cases, the rope chart seems to be fairly horizontal. This is the growth in daily new cases by country. We've got we've got the 0 line here. Anyone below 0 is most recently has been anyone below 0 here on the 26th is trending downward in their growth. They're seeing fewer and fewer new cases each day. Anyone above 0 is trending upwards. There's a very horizontal look to this graph right now. Sometimes we've seen it angled downward. Sometimes we've seen it angled upwards. Not, I think, for the countries usually, but I think it's pretty flat now. We kind of have 2 overlapping themes, I'd say. It looks to me that there are quite a number of countries that have roughly the slope of Peru here, a slight upward slope in growth, which is to say their growth rate is increasing. Now that can be something like Austria, where their growth rate is low but increasing, so getting worse but still at 6% fewer cases each day, looking pretty good, or Switzerland or Germany, or this one's almost an outlier. Spain is actually looking pretty problematic right now. But there are a lot of them that are just slightly angled upwards. And then there are those that are slightly angled downwards, like Israel, Turkey, the United States. All of these are getting better in their growth rates. Some of them are above the line, like Russia, where though they're angled downward, they still have a positive growth rate. They're seeing more and more cases each day, but the rate of that is dropping. So Russia headed in a matter of days, it looks like, towards zero, where they'll cease to grow day over day. Or India also headed in the right direction, but above the zero line. Certainly the outlier here is Pakistan. Pakistan's brand new and on our list. It has risen into number 25. I never quite remember who's being displaced in 25. Peru has already moved way up in the list, so it's not them. Saudi Arabia also moved onto the list recently. Chile, Mexico, these are all, I think, relative newcomers. But Pakistan has a very high growth rate right now, 20% growth per day and rising sharply. As we keep seeing, there's always a tendency for the really high performers, either in sharp upward growth or sharp downward growth, to head back towards zero in a matter of days, either because this was just due to a bunch of randomness, a few days that were randomly high, or because maybe when something like Pakistan sees that their growth rate is extreme, they start taking drastic steps, and immediately it slows. But that's called regression to the mean. We expect it to happen. We will expect it to happen even with Israel, though Israel, it doesn't have quite the extreme downward growth that we've sometimes seen, and that were comparable to Pakistan, the 20% growth. It's typical to have our growth rates between about -15 and +15, maybe -10 to +10, but it is possible, we've seen it before, to have a 20% daily growth rate, 20% new cases each day. That is very, very high, and when you see it paired with a line like this, if Pakistan somehow doesn't bend back towards zero, they will quickly rise in this list. And this is why they're here now, is because they have this extremely high growth and have had it for a very high growth rate, and have had it for weeks. That's allowed them to rise out of wherever they started back in April 12th, where they were doing so badly. They're now seeing this cluster of broadly above zero. There are a few exceptions, but mostly they seem to be seeing a trend upwards. And it's probably not just random noise, not if they're in the top 25. They have enough cases for this probably to be a genuine trend. But worldwide, we're not seeing the kind of recovery that seemed evident for the world, where the whole world has dropped below zero and really seems like it's going to stay there. I would have guessed that a couple weeks ago, 10 days ago, when everyone was headed downward. We now see a mix. No one's really in a runaway epidemic, but and obviously many of them are recovering, are trending towards recovery, but some are trending away from recovery. So the world is in a balance. We've seen this for a few days now. There's this real sense of we're balanced, and maybe could fall either way, or maybe we can't stay here forever. As long as we're here at this point, we will continue to have the same number of new cases every day, and eventually we'll run out of people to have new cases on. So it can't last forever. Eventually we'll hit herd immunity if we just hang out at zero here, but it's not heading there quickly. It's being at zero growth with relatively few cases compared to what it could be does suggest that we're at least keeping this thing relatively under control, but we aren't seeing that nice downward trend that we've seen before. And this really illustrates that. The world cases, flat, absolutely flat. New cases every day, it's the same as the day before. It fluctuates a lot, but roughly the same as the day before. And then this as well, saying as a world, we're right around that zero mark. We're not recovering. We're not running off into exponential growth. There was one bad day, but there have been a number of good days recently of negative growth. And so we continue without any end in sight right now. I haven't been spending as much time on the death rates lately. I will just say that the death rates seem to be trending slightly downward, a little more than the case rates. You would think. Well, we've talked in some detail about this. You would tend to expect the death rates to follow the case rates. Some people think that a couple weeks later, the death graph should look like the case graph. We have not seen that. We see them almost opposite, which I think may be due to better treatment or improved healthcare load taken off some of the hospitals in some areas where we're just doing better with the patients we have. But regardless, I would say if you look broadly at the death rate, it seems to be declining, but still not very much. It's right around zero, just like the case rate. It's fairly flat. We'll watch that as the days go by. And so another way of looking at it, the death rate seems fairly flat. Same number of new deaths each day, but there's that decline, slight decline showing where we could make the case that we're seeing 3% fewer deaths on average each day. So, good. I'm continuing to have these sad faces in the upper left of my graph. I know how to make them go away usually, but I may be doing that a lot today because these graphs keep dying on me. Switching to the states of the United States. Actually, I don't feel like I spent quite enough time on countries. Let's look at a few of the outliers just to see who's. We talked about Pakistan, but who's doing well? Well, Israel is doing very well. Turkey, which has been all over the place, doing very well. United States is doing very well, 5% growth rate and dropping. As a whole, doing very well. This again is confirmed cases rather than presumed cases. And as we saw yesterday, in extreme cases, in extreme circumstances, like yesterday, the confirmed and presumed can diverge so much that we get very different looking graphs when we're looking at the individual states versus the country as a whole. But in confirmed cases, the United States is looking good. Portugal also seems to be looking good. Some of the other ones that aren't looking so good, Brazil, Mexico, Peru. South America, as we've seen, is been taking a hit lately. 10% growth rate in some of its major countries and rising. And the rest is all in that 5% to negative 5% range. Saudi Arabia, which was looking much worse, is now trending towards a better place. Russia, which has been looking much worse, is also trending towards a better place. The ones that are seem to be losing their grip a little bit are Austria and Switzerland, and Germany. They're all below zero. As long as they stay below zero, it'll be fine. They'll get over it. But Germany especially is coming awfully close to that zero line. They're only 2% drop in new cases each day and trending upwards. So we could see some sort of a new growth happening in Germany. All right, now let's go into the states. So as always, New York leading. The graph here looks a little wiggly. It's not a straight line. It's certainly not shooting off to infinity. It looked like it was flattening out and maybe unflattening and flattening back out. This will be much more apparent in the daily graph. From this graph, it just kind of looks like a line that goes up. New Jersey, also a line that goes up. And so they all are. They're all lines that go up until we look at the daily graph. Some of the lines then clearly are not going up. But New York is interesting. New York broadly is trending back downwards after hitting its peak around April 6th. But we do have this very disturbing mini trend here. New York has had just yesterday one of its biggest days. The United States also had one of its biggest days yesterday because New York did. And many days in a row now, 5 days in a row, we've seen this rise. So we'll see. Hopefully this won't be. Usually when we see these mini trends, they last for maybe a week and then they're done. And like this one, which was a nice downward mini trend for exactly a week, This one's headed up, so probably it's going to turn back around. Again, as we talked about extensively yesterday, there may have been a switch. There may be I haven't found anything formal about it. If anyone knows about it, let me know. The description, I'm told, says April 25th. Which description is that, I wonder? Maybe it's the description of the video. I think I know what happened here. There were actually two videos. I've never quite figured out YouTube. There are two live streams that they said were upcoming, and I changed one of them to the 26th, and looks like it's streaming the other one. So yes, this is the 26th. If we look at New York, then it's trending upwards, but maybe it will turn around. Hopefully it will turn around, because that's a very bad angle if that's what we're seeing. New Jersey's fairly flat, maybe trending slightly downward. Massachusetts. So what we saw again is that there may be a trend towards reporting more of the suspected cases, the presumed cases, than the confirmed cases. We certainly saw a divergence on that in yesterday's data, but if so, then we'll see spikes like this as that takes hold, and then, well, this graph will probably continue upwards, but the rope chart will see a brief 3 to 6 day sweep upwards for kind of all states, and then it will recover and come back downwards. That's what it would look like if the trends themselves don't really change, but the way the reporting changes. So maybe that's why New York is this way. Maybe this is why Massachusetts is this way. We see a lot of these cases where there are suddenly spikes a couple days ago and today often. California, not so much. Pennsylvania, again, had this big spike. What might be, and a lot of the most recent days are much lower than yesterday. So I have not found confirmation in the news that there was a reporting change. But if there was, then what might have happened is they reported the higher number, and now the trend continues downward because everything is going downward. That's what I'm hoping happened. Another possibility is that as a whole, the country has caught up with testing a couple days ago, and now we're returning to the number of so new cases are reporting just because we caught up a few days of testing, and now we're hopefully testing more or less in real time. But we do see this theme across a lot of states. Per capita, per million, we see Rhode Island still. In fact, no, that's New York. New York had a very bad most recent day, as we've mentioned. Rhode Island's most recent day is in line with its trend, but still puts it above every other state per capita. So Rhode Island is still doing the worst, but it's kind of bending downwards, I believe, as we'll see in the rope chart. New Jersey, definitely bending downwards. It was looking for a little bit like New Jersey might head back upwards, but it seems to be getting a little bit back on track, but not as well as New York. New York, in spite of its most recent day, is trending downwards in a nice way, and a few others as well. Louisiana, Michigan, some of the feared hotspots that never materialized. Let's see what Ohio's doing. Yeah, that is the penitentiary. That bump is the 2,000 some people they found that all had gotten coronavirus in a single prison in Ohio. And since then, Ohio has just leveled back to its normal place. Everyone in that prison got COVID-19 pretty much, and then there were no one else to get it, and Ohio has leveled off. So that wild spike we saw in Ohio seems to be over. And really, all evidence points to that just being a particular spot outbreak in that prison. Looking at the rope chart, so certainly if you just look at it from a distance, most states are above zero, and most seem to be trending upwards. I'm going to zoom in on that more. That's bad, and that's both of the bads that we don't want to have. We don't want to have above zero, and if we do have above zero, we at least want to have something like Rhode Island here, where it's trending downward. So yeah, Rhode Island is indeed trending downward. It is bucking the trend of states as a whole. Though it still has a small 2% growth rate, it's headed to turn the corner in about 2 or 3 days. So Rhode Island has got whatever that was under control, it seems. And Texas is not doing terribly. It's got a very small growth rate of 1.5% or so, and it's flat, but it hasn't quite turned the corner, nor does it seem to be intending to in the short term. The good news here is from Georgia. Very interesting, Georgia. Let's zoom on Georgia. So Georgia's in the news because Georgia is being more lax than most states in opening up their state against federal guidance and generally earlier than a lot of people think that is safe. But the first day, well, it's been a few days. First few days are looking good. They haven't seen at least a radical instant burst of new cases, but it would take some time, and so we'll see what happens with Georgia. But so far the news with Georgia is good. They had a really great day of 31% drop in new cases, and more recently they've had 5% or so drop each day in new cases. So Georgia, according to this graph, is looking fine, perhaps in spite of their policies. Louisiana, unfortunately, looks to be headed back towards that zero line. Is going to hit at any time, and if so, it'll be back into growth territory. Louisiana was one of those hot spots that never materialized. My guess would be it's not going to run away with it this time either, but it does look like it may have another wave coming. Connecticut, Alabama, Ohio, again, after it got over that strange prison-related bump, is recovered. It's turned the corner a couple days ago and is now headed back. It's one of the top 4 states. After just a few days ago, it was the worst by far. The worst by far, or the worst slightly now, is Tennessee and North Carolina. Those two are really in trouble territory as of this short-term trend. They've got 10% growth and rising rapidly. And then there's sort of this general sense that a lot of states are headed upwards. Washington, really? Washington State. Washington State. Which you can see in the dots anyway. It got up earlier than everyone. It got over it, it turned the corner, it stayed below zero for a long time, and now the trend line is suggesting that it had a 33% day growth. The trend line is suggesting that it may be heading back up. This is just one day. I think without that day, Washington might be almost at zero, but this is actually 3 days. This is the average of 3 days. So they had something exceptional happen in Washington for at least one of the most recent 3 days. We'll watch that, but it's just a data point. Until we see at least 3 of those, I'm not going to read too much into it. But Washington certainly is not signaling phenomenal success as of today. It's showing signs of becoming one of the worst in its growth rates. California, also one of the worst in its growth rates. Massachusetts, and then the rest. Did we already do this? Rhode Island, yeah. So the broad picture here is that most states are above zero. Again, I went on and on yesterday about why this might just be a reporting issue, but it might not as well. If it is just a change in reporting, then we will see this dissipate in a matter of 2 to 5 days, let's say. And so we'll keep watching this and see, do these all head back to at least sort of an equilibrium around zero, or do they not? Are we actually seeing a genuine 20-state epidemic resurgence? That's a plain reading of the graph suggests a 20-state epidemic resurgence. But there's a lot more. There are a lot of other reasons that this could happen. In particular, changes of reporting and changes in testing. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. Okay, we have some very interesting things happening in the chat. Doing more testing, confirmed pace is bound to go up. Yes, that's what I'm alluding to with the possibility that that the improved testing will close the gap between confirmed cases and what do they call it? Suspected cases isn't the word. Presumed cases. So there again, as California isn't testing very well, as we'll see later, but as California continues to test more and more, we should reach a point, I would hope, especially as some of the faster tests come online broadly, we'll reach a point where there's going to be no reason to state something as a presumed case. You'll just test it, and then you'll know. So at that point, the very radical differences we saw in yesterday's video between presumed cases and confirmed cases will go away. We'll just have the same number on both sides. So that and that again, I think we'll see if it is a change in them now reporting presumed cases where they used to be reporting confirmed cases, then that will also go away in this rope chart, because the rope chart, or the left side of the rope chart, will be confirmed cases, and the right part will progressively be more important and will be the presumed cases. But again, these are going to go away. Everyone's working on ramping up testing, so those two will converge. Okay, yeah, that's Georgia in a week. I'm seeing in chat, we are sure going to be watching Georgia, because right now they're doing great, but there's a lot of alarm about what might happen in Georgia, and we'll find out. We will find out. And as I always say, I'm in one sense happy that Georgia is doing this experiment, because it will let us see, it'll give us some actual comparative data between what happens if you release at this stage versus if you release after you've had, say, 14 days of declining new cases, as federal guidance suggests. Okay. California testing by county will be covered later. DMP. I'm just trying to read all this as we go along. Okay, so there are still cases. Isaac in the chat says that in California, people tried to get tested and they couldn't get tested. That is still the case. My company is working in Santa Cruz County with UCSC to enhance testing, and we know that there. It was just a few days ago that there was something in the news that said that California had cleared its testing backlog. So at this point, people with symptoms in a hospital certainly can get tested. People with symptoms not in a hospital, I think, can get tested. People without symptoms showing up somewhere probably still can't get tested, because we're just reaching the point where we can test all the people who most need it. But I think it's a couple weeks from now, it will probably become possible for anyone to just show up and get tested. And there are these mail-in tests. I don't know what their availability is, but if you desperately want to get tested, in theory, you can buy a test. They'll mail it to you. You take your sample at home, you send it back, and they'll give you your results. And so that's probably a week or more in turnaround, but it does let anyone be tested if those are actually available. And I don't know. I don't know their availability, but there was a mail-in test approved by the FDA or someone recently. Anyway, yeah, so Georgia, we're very interested about Georgia. Georgia looking quite good right now, but it's kind of funny actually that with all the hoopla around Georgia, that it is the leader in the top 25 right now. It's got everything we want to see in a state: downward negative growth rate and a downward trend in its growth. But we'll see. Georgia just is starting to open things up, and so we might see this shoot off if that turns out to be a very bad idea. Colorado also worth noting. Colorado is opening some things tomorrow, and so as Colorado, it's already has the things we don't like to see, which is to say a slight growth rate, a positive growth rate of 3% and rising. So Colorado does not, to my mind, look like a state that should be opening right now, but they're doing it anyway. They're starting to do it, and we will see. we'll see what happens. And then we'll take a look at Texas. Texas is pretty flat. I don't know actually what Texas's plans on opening are, but I do think that they chafe more at the restrictions than some. So we'll see. But New York is, well, again, New York has had some very bad days. So all of a sudden, New York is looking positive too, 5% and rising. But let's wait. Let's wait on that one. Two is still not enough to make a trend. 3 points like that, maybe, but there may be a change in how these are being reported. Testing by state. So Rhode Island, as always, is a runaway winner in this case, though we'll notice there's a sudden spike in testing in New York. New York has always been doing great too, but Rhode Island has tested almost 5% of its population. That's amazing. New York has now tested almost 4% of its population. Also amazing. Louisiana is doing very well. Massachusetts, New Jersey. So those are kind of the standout leaders, but especially Rhode Island. Virginia always seems to be the worst, but still, having tested 0.8% of the population, is not doing terribly. Let's look at those 3 that I don't quite know why I put Texas in here. I just have a sense that, oh, I've lost my lines in my graph. That sometimes happens. We're not going to have enough graphs here for that to be a problem. Texas, Colorado, and Georgia. Oh, this really is going to be a problem without lines. All right, we'll turn off. We'll do it one at a time. So Texas is accelerating testing. That's good to see. Colorado, accelerating testing in the most recent day. We'll see if that's real. And well, let's look at California. So California, we can't see it. It's going to be such a mess without my lines here. But California is somewhere down here, I think. I'll blink it. Yeah. California at least is now at the top of the bottom of the pack. There's this whole pack of the big loser states, and California has slightly broken out of that. They've tested 1.3% of the population total. So California, I can't complain quite as much as I usually do, but obviously there's a lot of upside for California to do better. Georgia, where is Georgia in the pack? Yeah, Georgia is one of the big loser states. Not very impressive, Georgia, especially with you opening yourself up that way. In Colorado, I think also, yeah, Colorado's at the bottom of the worst. So the states that are opening are the ones that aren't testing enough. We keep hearing from various experts, or might even say pundits, that we can't open until we have better testing. I don't know that that's true. I'm not really here to make that determination, but some people say it. Others say we just should open and get the economy rolling and then shut down selectively if we need to, and generally take a cautious but not extreme position on this. And again, I'm not trying to take a position on either of those approaches, but I am very interested to analyze the data that happens when they do. So we'll be watching Georgia and Colorado, and anyone else who takes an extreme stance on opening up, because those extreme stances will be the ones that we can really do comparisons on. Yeah, all right. I get that Rhode Island is a small country, but state. But remember, when we look at it per capita, Rhode Island still is the absolute loser of new cases. They have more cases per capita than anyone else. So Rhode Island has something outrageous going on, and it doesn't explain it. New York might say, well, we're way bigger than Rhode Island, so of course we aren't testing as much as they are. That explains the total number of tests, but Rhode Island's budget is correspondingly large, and you'd think their medical facilities would be correspondingly small, and yet when it's all scaled out, this is per percentage as well, percentage of population. This is not based on total numbers. Rhode Island has vastly fewer tests than New York, I'm sure, but somehow they are doing a really good job of testing and getting 5% of their population tested. Iceland did this too, and people say, well, Iceland's such a small country, but we are adjusting for that. We're adjusting for that because we're controlling for population both in our total number of cases and that graph above, and in our total tests. And here's testing per million. If you look at testing per million, there's Rhode Island. This is adjusted for the size of the state. Rhode Island tests twice as much as anyone else. Massachusetts doing very well in daily testing, that is. And also Rhode Island is accelerating its testing. So there's the states can learn something from Rhode Island. Maybe they have a medical center in there, or a hospital or a university that's just really well suited to this and was able to ramp it up fast the way we're trying to do to some degree in Santa Cruz with UCSC. Or maybe they have an industry partner, a major testing company there that preferentially tests Rhode Island residents. I still have not been able to find the answer to that. But the bottom line is Rhode Island, assuming these numbers are correct, is testing. It's punching way above its weight. So Louisiana. I really don't believe that Louisiana number. I don't understand what's happening there. I'll show it to you again briefly, because Louisiana, which did quite well in testing, suddenly is reporting, according to this data set, covidtracking.com, that it's testing practically no one. And I just don't believe that. Louisiana is not over its epidemic. They would not have scaled back testing. So the data collection is messed up there. There's no way that's real. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the counties of California. I'll maybe just do a quick summary of what the states look like again. The rope chart. Again, states largely above zero, growing. We don't like to see that. We didn't see that. There was a day, 14 days ago, when it really looked like all the states were headed in the right direction. Almost all of them were pointed downward. Most of them were below zero, or at least 2/3 of them were below zero. We have lost that. We have lost our grip on that apparent recovery, and we don't really know why. At least I don't know why. There are very few states pointing in the clear recovery direction at this point. I'm hoping it's due to increased testing. I'm hoping it's due to changes in how we're reporting, but I don't know. I'm hoping it's not due to an actual dramatic increase in the prevalence of the infection in the population and rising. But we'll find that out. It will become clear. If it's testing or change of reporting, these graphs will come back down. If it is a new epidemic across 30 states, 20 states, that will also show up in these data. All right, DMP, tell your friends. Tell them you love this stream. I do like this stream, I might say, but I also like to have lots of listeners. So tell people about it. All I'm trying to do here is present the data, especially with a focus on growth rates, so that people can see really ahead of the news cycle what's coming. We do get the news here ahead of the news cycle, as long-term listeners will tell you. We know here, because of the rope chart, we know before this graph, which is the typical news graph, what's the total cases. Before this graph shows, and even before the daily graphs show, which is the second thing you sometimes get in the news, we get to see where things are headed. So, and it was originally when all the news was so dire, and I was looking at the rope charts and saying, well, it really looks like everything's recovering. Or we're turning towards recovering, or one day from now it looks like the country's going to turn the corner. That's when I started doing this live stream, because I didn't think that was being recognized. Now, when we look at the counties of California, you see Los Angeles is kind of doing it's not a line, let's just say it waves. When you see this much waviness in the total, you know that something really extreme is going on, because these lines don't tend to change much. They tend to just go in straight lines, as you can kind of see down there. And we can see that here in the daily cases. Again, Los Angeles is the only county in California. You heard it here first, because no one else is contributing cases anything like Los Angeles. And so what Los Angeles does is will determine the state numbers for some time to come. All these counties together could all double or stop having cases entirely, and it would be noticeable, but it would not. It would if they all stopped having cases, it would probably outweigh Los Angeles, but no one else is close. Riverside tries sometimes, San Francisco, but yeah, Los Angeles. So we saw this dramatic leap a week ago, and since then we've had a lovely little mini trend downward. So now Los Angeles is not shooting up to infinity quite the way it was before, and indeed, I think the rope chart is probably going to show us Los Angeles is going to be is showing a flattening off again, like we had a few weeks ago. Flattened off, and then suddenly it shot up again, and now I think it's going to flatten off again. Again, is this testing? Is it due to change in reporting, or is it actually an epidemic? Well, the nice thing here is this really contradicts the thesis that this is an epidemic. It's if it had just taken off unless something really quick happened, like a particular location, like Cook County Jail or the Ohio Pen or the San Francisco homeless shelter or various other places, the Washington State nursing home. Sometimes you get a spike just because one place gets it really bad and then it drops back to the trend line. Maybe that happened in LA, though I haven't heard it. So again, I don't quite know how to explain this, but I do know that we are seeing a mini trend downward and a very nice day on the most recent day. We look at everyone else, their daily cases, and I do see something in the chat. I'll get to that in a minute. Daily cases, Riverside is starting to recover, which is nice. San Diego is starting to unrecover, which is not so nice. Was looking so good, San Diego, and then there are people around San Diego who are starting to protest the lockdowns and go out in public and so on, and saying we don't need no stinking lockdowns. It's not so clear from this graph that San Diego doesn't need no stinking lockdowns, but maybe it's still not proven that lockdowns have any effect at all. I tend to believe they do. I certainly think we should stick with them, but again, I like to see people trying different things so we can come in after the fact and try to do comparative studies to say how which techniques were effective. Santa Clara is looking quite good. They've really turned the corner and are heading downwards. Sacramento as well, etc., etc. Contra Costa, I can't quite read into there, but the rope chart is probably more, well, no, I like, now that we're really starting to see these downward trends in certain counties, I really like to focus on them, because these were the things that the rope chart were predicting when it was saying they crossed zero. That probably means they flattened off and will be heading down now. So we're seeing these in a lot of countries. Ventura peaked and is dropping. Contra Costa peaked and is dropping. Marin peaked and is dropping. Santa Barbara peaked and is dropped. This is per million. I'll just briefly spend a little time here. Imperial, which moved into the 25th place a few days ago, still showing a pretty bad trend. Per capita, Imperial is beating everyone else, including Los Angeles. So Imperial is just not really getting better. Here's another data point, several data points way up there. So Imperial has something going on. I would say that Imperial actually does have an epidemic happening. And we'll see how it looks on the rope chart about whether that's recovering. Other counties generally not. They're certainly not showing shooting off to infinity exponential epidemic growth. We'll take a quick look at Riverside, because that's always been a contender for at least for second place. No one's really contending for first, but Riverside wants to be second place, it seems, and they may lose that per cap. Is looking bad, I would say. I'm going to go out and come right out and say it. It's looking bad, kind of like the States. We have more bad news than good, at least at the first level, which is who's above zero. Oh, I needed to head back to this. Something's hitting my mic. I don't even know where my mic is. I'll just take my hands off the computer. Okay. Someday I'll figure out where the mic is on this computer. But I did have my fingers over onto the left side, so maybe the mic was there. So, this lowest has been a problem spot sometimes, then it got better, then it became a problem spot again. We are always talking about Riverside. Pretty big and pretty hard hit by the virus. But right now, Riverside's looking okay. 6% negative growth day over day and dropping. And similarly, San Joaquin, which we also sometimes talk about, especially since we have a little bit of a focus on San Francisco Bay Area, and there is some cross-pollination between San Joaquin and Bay Area probably. San Joaquin is looking very good, 9% fewer cases each day and dropping. You've got something like Ventura here, which also is looking pretty good. 8% fewer cases and dropping, but not dropping. 8% fewer cases holding steady. That's fine. That'll get them out of the woods if they can avoid this very slight tendency towards zero they're showing. Santa Barbara similarly is dropping, but not trending, not accelerating in its dropping rate. San Bernardino is looking okay, and a few of these are right here on the edge: Contra Costa, Alameda, and Sacramento. The rest are up. We have a few that are trending towards a better place. Oh, Imperial. Yeah, Imperial does seem to have, after being our outstanding epidemic center in California for a little bit in terms of acceleration, it is now decelerating. Still has a positive growth rate, but it's headed towards zero. So Imperial will probably drop away. Worth mentioning, by the way, Monterey has again displaced Santa Cruz as number 25. Those two trade places, they're both doing well enough, but Monterey really, the trend line is not good with 10% and rising, but the number of cases is fairly small, so they don't contribute a lot to the state's numbers. San Diego is our new worst case, very much in line with Fresno, but San Diego is second. It has taken second place in terms of new cases. I actually don't quite remember how I do the calculation of the ordering. It's not something really obvious, but I think it has to do with sort of looking at the number of new cases in recent days, and so it's more around the number of new cases than the number of total cases. But San Diego, by whatever that metric is now in second place. At least I guess it's lost first place. No, San Diego is first place. Sorry, it has taken first place, overtaking Fresno, which is much farther down the list in its growth rate. So having our second largest county with a growth rate of 18% per day and accelerating, that is the worst news of California counties today. San Diego is our worst news today. It's really in very bad shape. 20%, and again, these trends change day over day. It might be fine in 3 days, but right now the news is bad for San Diego as it accelerates towards being our next epidemic, exponential, out of control growth center. So hopefully San Diego gets a lid on that soon. And Marin is doing similarly. Monterey, orange. Again, even just 3 days ago, we weren't seeing it so bad as this. So those other two theories, other than that we are actually seeing a surge in virus, are that we are seeing improved testing, finding more cases, or that we are seeing changes in reporting, where more counties are reporting their presumed cases rather than their actual confirmed cases. In the latter case, change of reporting, this will all trend downward in a matter of days. In the former case, a change of testing, it will also trend downward, though I think it'll take a week or two before once testing capacity really outstrips new cases, then that will also cease to impact the metrics in the way that it is doing now. Far too many people walking around Santa Cruz beaches, Westcliff. Now the weather's better. Yeah, we'll see. We're seeing this throughout. The country as a whole is just not being quite as serious about following the lockdowns. I think summer's here. People feel like maybe the news isn't as bad, which hasn't been looking as bad, and so they're breaking the rules more. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. Maybe there's a terrible calamity coming, or maybe it just is going to unflatten the curve a little bit, and we'll be able to cope, and that'll be a reasonable balance. Testing by county, I'm way over my time here. I really like to finish in 30 minutes, but that pretty much never happens. I don't have all counties here, but gradually we get more and more testing by county. This is the percent of total population tested by county. They're all testing steadily, as you can see these rising. Riverside, I'm going to show this with its actual data points. The trend line is not accurate. As you can see, we didn't have testing data, and now we do. This is the real trend line. Connect the dots there. But still, that puts Riverside right at the top of testing. 1.5% of their population tested so far, and rising. San Francisco, similarly, 1.5% tested. That's pretty good, but remember, Rhode Island did 5%. Even weeks ago, Iceland had done 8%. There's no reason we can't do 5 or 8% in any of these counties if we really were to apply ourselves towards that. So great that they're rising, but California is still really not, in my opinion, working as hard towards testing, given the number of very smart people who are saying that is the way out of here. We will test our way out of here, say smart people. I don't hear a lot of people saying, testing's not that important. So assuming that testing really is important, California is it's like for maybe 20th out of the top 25. And so I finished this as I always seem to, saying California is not doing a good enough job of testing. If we want to see some of these things, some of these trends change, especially this, no, that's not the one I wanted, especially the rope chart with all these counties which are seeing daily growth of new cases, we can test our way out of it, I believe. So say many smart people. So California, I do think we did see this one promising thing about California here. No, I don't want that. I'm looking for the testing. Daily testing in California. Nope, that doesn't look promising. What was I seeing? I thought I saw a burst, and certainly we see this extravagant day where they got caught up on all their backlog. But I thought I had seen sort of a bump of testing. Maybe that was San Francisco. Or maybe that was Los Angeles. Yeah, I think it was Los Angeles, maybe. Los Angeles was starting to show a sharper upward trend in testing that maybe has died off a little bit. Maybe I need to do this tested per day graph that I do for states. But yeah, Los Angeles, for all that it's the worst, is not, you would think that the worst state in cases would be trying its utmost to be the best in testing. And we've seen that in other cases where New York, for instance, the worst state in cases was the best state in testing, at least till Rhode Island took the crown. Los Angeles is not doing that. It's right in the middle of the pack. Its testing is adequate, 1% of the population. South Korea got out of it with 4/10 to 0.8% of the population, so you can test your way out of it with that, but why not do 10 times that? Rhode Island can. Riverside added a new drive-through test site. Good. When that's how South Korea seemed to have done it. It was their drive-through test sites that were really revolutionary. Plus, they had a major company that made tests, and that helped a lot too. I keep wondering whether that's the case with Rhode Island as well. So, yeah, I think the way out of it is testing, and but right now the news is not looking great for counties. I hope this is an effective increased testing that will die away, or change of reporting that will die away, because if not, we're definitely in a bad shape in California right now. And similarly, as I recall, let's take another quick look at the rope chart for the states. We're in bad shape at the state level as well, for sure. There's the zero line, and here's everybody above it. And the only good news then, or the broad good news, is that as countries go, we're not in such bad shape. Right? As the world goes, the world seems to be at least kind of stable, ignoring Pakistan, which is really an outlier at this point. The world is stable around that zero line, so at least we aren't seeing runaway epidemic growth. When I started this, it looked to me like the world and the country and the state were all trending towards zero. We're headed below zero, that we were going to see the whole thing turn around in a week. I almost stopped reporting about a week in, because it just seemed like things were obviously headed in such a good direction. Today, that really is no longer the case. Now all I can do is hope that the data do not reflect reality, and that these are artifacts of reporting and testing. Or if not, then we need to keep doing the things we're doing, or start doing them more, and having maybe cracking down more. I don't know what the different solutions are. Testing more, contact tracing, The contact tracing apps are coming. Those will be real fun. Everyone can have something on their phone that Bluetooths everyone they walk by to say, you walked by Bob Jones on the street the other day, and look, now Bob has COVID-19, and so you should be tested. That's coming for those who are willing to turn over that degree of information to some central authority. I'm guessing a lot of people will be, and some people won't, and hopefully it'll be enough people will be willing to do that we can actually go somewhere with it. So that's the very mixed news today. Generally bad news today, I'm sad to say, but we'll check in tomorrow and the next day and see if some of those possible theories about why the news is bad are reality. My name is Greg Farrar. That's the COVID-19 trend news. Don't believe the title. It is April 26th. Thanks for listening.